The June sun blazed mercilessly over the city of Atlanta, casting long shadows across the sprawling campus of Westbrook University. The heat rose from the pavement in shimmering waves, and the air hung thick with humidity and anticipation. Today was graduation day, and the outdoor stadium was filled with thousands of proud families, their voices creating a constant hum of excitement beneath the cloudless Georgia sky. Maya Johnson stood backstage, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She smoothed down her royal blue graduation gown, the fabric already clinging to her skin from the oppressive heat. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her cap for what felt like the 100th time. "You're going to be fine," whispered her best friend Destiny, who stood beside her in an identical gown. "You've worked 4 years for this moment. Nothing can take this away from you." Maya nodded, but her eyes kept darting toward the faculty section where the professors sat in their academic regalia. She was looking for one face in particular, Professor Richard Thornton, the man who had made her life a living nightmare for the past 2 semesters. "Is he here?" Destiny asked, following Maya's gaze. "Third row, far left," Maya replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's been staring at me since we lined up." Richard Thornton was a tall man in his late 50s, with silver hair slicked back and cold grey eyes that seemed to pierce through everyone they landed on. He was the head of the Business Administration Department and one of the most respected professors at Westbrook University. At least, that's what his reputation suggested. Maya knew a different side of him. It had started 8 months ago during her final year. Maya had enrolled in Professor Thornton's Advanced Business Ethics course, expecting it to be the capstone of her academic career. Instead, it had become a source of constant anxiety and dread. The stadium erupted in applause as the university president took the podium. Maya's stomach churned. Soon, they would call her name. Soon, she would walk across that stage, shake hands with the dean, and receive her diploma. But first, she had to pass by Professor Thornton's section. "Welcome, graduates, families, and honored guests," the president announced, his voice booming through the speakers. "Today, we celebrate the achievements of our graduating class. These young men and women have worked tirelessly to reach this milestone, overcoming obstacles and pushing beyond their limits." Maya thought about those words, overcoming obstacles. If only the president knew what some of those obstacles had been. It started with subtle comments. Professor Thornton would call on Maya during lectures, then dismiss her answers with a condescending smile. He gave her papers lower grades than she felt they deserved, marking them with vague criticisms. When she went to his office hours to discuss her grades, he would lean too close, his breath reeking of coffee and something sharper. He would tell her she needed to try harder to impress him, that she needed to show more dedication. Maya tried to ignore it at first. She was so close to graduating. She couldn't afford to cause trouble, but then the comments became more personal. "You know," Thornton had said one evening in his office, "students who show me the proper respect tend to do much better in my class. Some students understand the value of a good relationship with their professor." Maya had left his office that night, feeling sick to her stomach. She had reported the incident to the administration, but nothing had come of it. Professor Thornton was too well connected, too respected. The university had investigated and found no evidence of wrongdoing. After that, things got worse. Thornton failed Maya on her midterm paper, a 20-page analysis she had spent weeks writing. He accused her of plagiarism without any evidence. Maya had to go before an academic integrity board to defend herself. It had taken 2 months and countless sleepless nights, but she had finally been cleared. But the damage was done. Her GPA had suffered, her mental health had deteriorated, she had almost dropped out entirely. "Maya," Destiny's voice pulled her back to the present. "They're starting with the B's. We're up soon." Maya nodded, wiping the sweat from her palms. She could do this. She just had to walk across that stage, ignore Thornton's eyes on her, and collect her diploma. Then she would be free. The names rolled on, each one met with cheers and applause from the audience. Maya watched her classmates cross the stage, their faces beaming with pride and joy. She tried to summon some of that joy for herself, but all she felt was a hollow anxiety. Jennifer Harrison, Marcus Hayes, David Henderson. The Jays were coming up fast. Maya Johnson. Her legs moved before her brain could catch up. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the wooden stage. The spotlights were blinding, and she could barely make out the faces in the crowd. But she didn't need to see them. She knew her mother was out there somewhere, crying tears of pride. Her grandmother, who had traveled all the way from Mississippi to see her only granddaughter graduate. Her little brother, probably bored, but present nonetheless. She was doing this for them, for all of them. Maya approached the dean, a kindly woman in her 60s, with warm brown eyes. Dean Patricia Morris smiled at her, extending her hand. "Congratulations, Miss Johnson," the dean said, her voice genuine. "We're proud of you." Maya shook her hand, feeling a rush of emotion. She turned to receive her diploma from the assistant dean, and for a brief moment everything was perfect. Then she had to walk back. The path back to her seat took her directly past the faculty section, past Professor Richard Thornton. Maya kept her eyes forward, her chin high. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. She was a graduate now. He had no power over her anymore. But as she approached his row, something unexpected happened. Professor Thornton stood up. Maya's heart lurched. What was he doing? Faculty members didn't stand during the ceremony. They sat in their seats and clapped politely for each graduate. They didn't stand up in the middle of the procession. "Miss Johnson," Thornton said, his voice carrying across the quiet murmur of the crowd. "Wait just a moment." Maya froze. She could feel thousands of eyes turning toward her. The applause that had been following her died down, replaced by confused whispers. "Is there a problem, Professor Thornton?" Dean Morris called from the podium, her brow furrowed. "Just a small matter," Thornton replied, moving toward Maya. "It won't take but a second." Maya's mind raced. What was he going to do? Accuse her of something in front of everyone? Make some final attempt to humiliate her? She should have kept walking. She should have ignored him and taken her seat, but her feet seemed rooted to the ground, her body paralyzed by fear and confusion. Thornton approached her, his cold grey eyes fixed on hers. He was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who had cornered its prey. "I've been meaning to tell you something, Miss Johnson," he said, his voice low but still audible to those nearby. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you've beaten me." Maya's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I don't know what you're talking about, Professor." "Oh, I think you do." Thornton reached out and grabbed the front of her graduation gown. "You made a lot of accusations about me, tried to ruin my reputation, but look who's walking across this stage, and look who's still standing." Before Maya could react, Thornton yanked at her gown, hard. The cheap fabric tore with a sickening rip, exposing the white dress Maya wore underneath. The force of his pull made her stumble, and she nearly fell to the ground. Gasps erupted from the audience. Someone screamed. Maya could hear her mother's voice somewhere in the chaos, calling her name. "Security!" Dean Morris shouted into the microphone. "Someone get security up here now!" But Thornton wasn't done. His face was twisted with rage, decades of entitlement and arrogance bubbling to the surface. He grabbed Maya's arm, his grip bruising. "You should have kept your mouth shut," he hissed. "You should have just taken what I offered and been grateful." Maya tried to pull away, but his grip was too strong. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled against him. This wasn't supposed to happen. This was supposed to be her day of triumph. Not this. Never this. And then a voice cut through the chaos. "Richard." The single word was spoken with such authority, such cold command, that Thornton froze mid-motion. His grip on Maya's arm loosened, and his face went pale as he turned toward the source of the voice. A man was walking down the center aisle of the stadium, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a commanding presence that seemed to fill the entire space. His hair was dark and peppered with grey, and he wore a tailored navy suit that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. But it was his eyes that drew attention. Dark, piercing, and fixed on Richard Thornton with an intensity that could melt steel. "Step away from her," the man said, his voice calm but laced with unmistakable menace. "Now." Thornton's hand fell away from Maya's arm as if he'd been burned. All the color had drained from his face, and his confident sneer had been replaced by something Maya had never seen before. Pure, unadulterated terror. "Mr. Kingston," Thornton stammered, I wasn't expecting—" The man, Kingston, continued his approach, never breaking eye contact with Thornton. He moved past the confused security guards, past the stunned faculty members, past the whispered questions of thousands of onlookers. When he reached the stage, he didn't even spare a glance for Thornton. Instead, he turned to Maya, and his expression softened immediately. The cold rage in his eyes melted into something warmer. Concern, protection, love. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, shrugging off his suit jacket and draping it over Maya's shoulders to cover her torn gown. Maya stared at him, her mind struggling to process what was happening. I'm fine, but who are you? How do you know?" "My name is Marcus Kingston," the man said, just loud enough for those nearby to hear, "and I'm your father." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. Maya felt her knees go weak. Her father? That was impossible. Her mother had always told her that her father had died before she was born. A car accident. Nothing more, nothing less. That's not possible," Maya whispered. "My father is dead." "I'm afraid your mother had her reasons for telling you that," Marcus replied, his voice heavy with regret. "But I assure you, I am very much alive, and I have been watching over you from a distance for your entire life." Before Maya could respond, Thornton let out a strangled laugh. "This is ridiculous," he said, though his voice was shaking. "I don't know who you are, but this has nothing to do with you. This is a university matter and—" "Richard." Marcus turned to face him, and the warmth disappeared from his expression instantly. "I would advise you to stop talking. Right now. You can't just come in here and—" "I can," Marcus interrupted, "and I will. You see, Richard, you and I have history, 23 years of history to be exact. Do you remember a young woman named Linda Johnson? She was a student at this very university, in the same department you were just starting your career in." Thornton's face went from pale to ashen grey. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "I see that you do," Marcus continued, his voice hard as granite. "Linda Johnson was my girlfriend. We were engaged to be married, and then you happened." The crowd was completely silent now. Even the babies had stopped crying, as if the entire stadium was holding its breath. "You did to her what you've been trying to do to every young woman in your department for the past 2 decades, Marcus said. "You preyed on her, manipulated her, threatened her grades, her future, her reputation, and when she tried to fight back, you destroyed her." Maya's mind was reeling. Linda Johnson. Her mother's name was Linda Johnson. Was this true? Had her mother been a victim of the same man who had tormented her? "Linda left the university after what you did," Marcus continued. "She was too ashamed, too broken to stay. She didn't tell me about the pregnancy until years later, and by then it was complicated. I was overseas, building my company. She was trying to rebuild her life. We made choices that we both regret." Marcus turned back to Maya, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I never stopped looking out for you. I funded your scholarships anonymously. I made sure you had opportunities. And when I heard what Thornton was doing to you, I knew I couldn't stay in the shadows anymore." "Mr. Kingston, please." Thornton was practically begging now, all pretense of authority gone. "Whatever you think you know, I can explain. There's been a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I have recordings, Richard. Women you've harassed over the years, colleagues who've looked the other way, university administrators who buried complaints. It took me 3 years and a small fortune, but I have evidence of everything." Thornton's legs seemed to give out. He stumbled backward, catching himself on the edge of a chair. "You can't—" This is blackmail. No, Richard, this is justice. Marcus turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying across the stadium. My name is Marcus Kingston. I am the CEO of Kingston Industries and a major donor to this university. I have evidence that Richard Thornton has been preying on female students for over 2 decades, and that the university administration has repeatedly covered up his behavior. The murmurs that erupted were deafening. Camera flashes went off as journalists in the audience scrambled to capture the moment. Dean Morris stood frozen at the podium, her face a mask of shock. This evidence will be turned over to the appropriate authorities, Marcus continued, but I want everyone here to know what this man is, and I want my daughter to know that she was never alone. Not ever. Maya felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't know if they were tears of joy, relief, or overwhelming confusion. Her whole life had just been turned upside down in the span of 5 minutes. 2 security guards finally arrived, flanking Thornton on either side. He looked around wildly, as if searching for an escape route, but there was nowhere to go. His career, his reputation, his entire world was crumbling around him. This isn't over, Thornton spat as the guards took hold of his arms. I have lawyers. I have friends in high places. You can't just... I think you'll find that I can, Marcus replied calmly. And I have more lawyers, more friends, and more resources than you can possibly imagine. Goodbye, Richard. I expect the next time we meet will be in court. As the security guards led Thornton away, the stadium erupted in chaos. People were standing, talking, pointing. The graduation ceremony had devolved into something no one could have predicted. But amidst all the chaos, Maya stood perfectly still, staring at the man who claimed to be her father. I know this is a lot to take in, Marcus said softly, stepping closer to her, and I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I should have been there. I should have fought harder to be part of your life. Why now? Maya's voice cracked. Why today? Because when I found out what Thornton was doing to you, I couldn't stand by any longer. Because today was supposed to be a celebration of everything you've accomplished, and I wasn't going to let him take that away from you. Marcus reached out hesitantly, as if afraid she would pull away. And because you deserve to know the truth. All of it. Maya looked at his outstretched hand. This man was a stranger to her, a ghost from a past she had never known. And yet, in his eyes, she saw something that made her heart ache. She saw herself. Before she could respond, another voice cut through the noise. Maya, baby. Maya turned to see her mother pushing through the crowd, her face streaked with tears. Linda Johnson was a small woman in her mid-40s, with graying hair and worry lines etched around her eyes. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the past 10 minutes. Mom! Maya rushed toward her, falling into her arms. Mom, what's going on? He says he's my father. He says Thornton. I know, baby, I know. Linda held her daughter tight, stroking her hair. I'm so sorry. I should have told you the truth a long time ago. Maya pulled back, looking at her mother with tear-filled eyes. Is it true? All of it? Linda's silence was answer enough. Why? Maya's voice broke. Why did you lie to me? I was trying to protect you, Linda whispered. When I found out I was pregnant, I was broken. Thornton had destroyed my reputation, my career, everything I had worked for. I didn't want any reminders of that time. And Marcus was already becoming someone important. His company was taking off. I didn't want to burden him. I didn't want you to grow up in the shadow of my shame. So you let me think my father was dead. It was wrong. I know that now. Linda cupped Maya's face in her hands. But everything I did because I love you. I wanted you to have a clean slate, a chance to be your own person, without the weight of my past. Maya wanted to be angry. She had every right to be angry. But looking at her mother's face, seeing the years of guilt and pain reflected in her eyes, she couldn't summon the rage. Only a profound, aching sadness. Marcus approached, slowly, keeping a respectful distance. Linda, he said quietly, I'm sorry for springing this on both of you. I should have found another way. Linda turned to face him, and for a long moment no one spoke. 23 years of history hung between them, love, loss, betrayal, and secrets that had shaped their lives in ways they were only now beginning to understand. "You had to," Linda finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thornton was never going to stop, and Maya deserved to know the truth." "She deserved to know a long time ago," Marcus replied. "We both failed her in that regard." The chaos around them was beginning to settle. The graduation ceremony had effectively ended, with Dean Morris making hurried announcements about rescheduling the remaining proceedings. Police had arrived to take statements. Journalists were being kept at bay by campus security. Maya looked around at the pandemonium, at the two people who had created her standing awkwardly side by side, at the life she thought she knew crumbling and rebuilding simultaneously. "I need time," she said quietly. "I need time to process all of this." Both Marcus and Linda nodded, understanding in their eyes. "I have a car waiting," Marcus offered. "I can take you anywhere you want to go, your mother too, if she's willing." Maya hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I think I'd like to go somewhere quiet, somewhere away from all of this." "I know just the place," Marcus said. As they made their way through the crowd, Maya caught sight of Destiny standing near the exit, her face a mixture of shock and concern. Maya mouthed a silent, "I'll call you later," and Destiny nodded, understanding that her friend needed space. The three of them, Maya, her mother, and the father she had never known, walked out of the stadium and into the blinding June sunlight. A black sedan was waiting at the curb, its engine running. As Maya slid into the cool, leather-scented interior of the car, she realized that she was leaving behind more than just a graduation ceremony. She was leaving behind the life she had known, the identity she had built, the story she had told herself about who she was and where she came from. But as she looked at the two people who had shaped her existence in ways she was only beginning to understand, she realized something else. She was not alone. She had never been alone, and whatever came next, she would face it with her eyes wide open. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving the chaos of Westbrook University behind. The drive from the university took nearly 2 hours. They left Atlanta's sprawling urban landscape behind, trading highways and traffic lights for winding country roads and stretches of untouched forest. No one spoke much during the journey. Maya sat in the back seat, her mother beside her, while Marcus drove with the focused concentration of a man navigating familiar territory. The house that eventually came into view was nothing short of stunning. A sprawling lakeside estate with floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the afternoon sun and a dock that stretched out over crystal blue water. It looked like something out of a magazine, the kind of home that existed in Maya's imagination, but never in her reality. "This is one of my properties," Marcus explained as he parked the car. "I come here when I need to think. It's private, secure, and far from prying eyes." Maya stepped out of the car, her legs still unsteady. The air here smelled different, cleaner, sharper, with hints of pine and fresh water. It was a stark contrast to the suffocating heat and chaos of the graduation ceremony. "It's beautiful," she murmured almost to herself. "I hoped you would like it." Marcus's voice was tentative, hopeful. "I always imagined bringing you here someday. I just never thought it would be under these circumstances." They made their way inside, where a housekeeper had already prepared refreshments. The interior of the house was just as impressive as the exterior, modern, tasteful, with carefully curated artwork and furniture that probably cost more than Maya's entire college education. As they settled into the living room, an uncomfortable silence descended. Maya sat on one end of a large sectional sofa, her mother on the other, with Marcus in an armchair across from them. The three of them formed a triangle of unspoken tensions and unasked questions. Finally, Maya broke the silence. "I want to know everything," she said, her voice steadier than she felt, "from the beginning. No more lies, no more half-truths. I deserve to know what really happened." Marcus and Linda exchanged a glance, a momentary communion between two people who had once shared a life together. "You're right," Marcus said. "You do deserve to know all of it." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on some middle distance as he gathered his thoughts. "I met your mother during my senior year at Westbrook," he began. "I was studying engineering. She was studying business administration. We were both scholarship students, both from families that didn't have much. That was part of what drew us together. We understood each other in a way that the other students didn't. We fell in love fast," Linda added, her voice soft with memory. "Too fast, maybe. Within 6 months, Marcus had proposed. We were going to get married after graduation, start a life together. But then everything changed," Marcus said, his jaw tightening. "Richard Thornton." The name hung in the air like poison. "He was a young professor then," Marcus continued. "Charming, connected, ambitious. The university loved him because he brought in donors and prestige. He had this way of making everyone feel special, like they had been chosen for something great." "He chose me," Linda whispered, and Maya could see the old pain surfacing in her mother's eyes. "At first, I thought it was mentorship. He praised my work, invited me to special seminars, told me I had a bright future ahead of me. I was flattered. I was naive." Maya reached out and took her mother's hand. Despite everything, despite the lies and secrets, this was still her mother. Still the woman who had raised her alone, who had sacrificed everything to give her a better life. "When did you realize?" Maya asked gently. "When he asked me to stay late after class one evening." Linda's voice had gone flat, mechanical, as if reciting a story that belonged to someone else. "He said he wanted to discuss my thesis proposal, but when I got to his office, he locked the door. He said that if I wanted to succeed, I needed to understand how the world really worked. He said he could make my career or destroy it." "You don't have to go into details," Maya said quickly, seeing the tears gathering in her mother's eyes. "No, you wanted the truth." Linda squeezed her daughter's hand. "The truth is that I was terrified. He didn't force himself on me physically. He didn't have to. He made it clear that if I didn't cooperate, if I didn't show him appreciation, he would fail me. He would tell the administration that I had cheated on my exams. He would make sure I never graduated." "I didn't know about any of this until later," Marcus said, his voice tight with old rage. "Linda didn't tell me. She was ashamed, scared. Thornton had convinced her that no one would believe her, that it would be her word against his. And back then, he was probably right. But eventually you found out," Maya said. "I found out because I caught him." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "I went to Linda's building one night to surprise her. I saw her leaving Thornton's office. The look on her face. I knew immediately that something was wrong. I broke down," Linda admitted. "I told Marcus everything, and he wanted to kill Thornton. Literally kill him." "I almost did," Marcus said quietly. "I went to his office the next morning, ready to beat him within an inch of his life. But Linda stopped me. She begged me not to throw away my future. She said that Thornton had too much power, too many connections, that if I attacked him, I would be the one who ended up in prison, and he would just find another victim." "So you let him get away with it?" Maya asked, unable to keep the accusation out of her voice. "No." Marcus met her eyes directly. "I made a different choice. I reported him to the administration. I went to the dean, to the board of trustees, to anyone who would listen. And do you know what happened?" Maya shook her head. "They buried it, all of it. They thanked me for my concern, told me they would look into the matter, and then nothing. A week later, I was called into the dean's office and told that my scholarship was being revoked. There were irregularities in my application, they said. Unless I wanted to face academic sanctions, I should consider transferring to another institution." "They forced you out," Maya breathed, "because you tried to help my mother. Thornton had friends everywhere, powerful friends, people who owed him favors, people who had benefited from his connections." Marcus's voice was bitter. "I was just a scholarship kid from the wrong side of town. I had no leverage, no protection. So I left. And I stayed." Linda's voice was hollow. I was too scared to leave, too beaten down. Thornton had won and I just wanted to survive long enough to graduate. So I kept my head down, finished my degree, and got as far away from Westbrook as possible. But she didn't tell me about the pregnancy, Marcus added. By the time I found out, Linda had already moved across the country. She had started a new life, and she didn't want any reminders of what had happened. So you just disappeared? Maya asked her father. You knew you had a daughter out there and you just walked away? The pain in Marcus's eyes was answer enough, but he spoke anyway. I made a choice that I have regretted every single day of my life. Linda told me that she didn't want me in your life. She said that my presence would only complicate things, that you were better off believing your father was dead. And I believed her. I was young, angry, ashamed of my failure to protect her. I threw myself into building my company, and I told myself that staying away was the kindest thing I could do. But you said you were watching over me, Maya said slowly. The scholarships, the opportunities, that was you. I never stopped caring about you, Marcus said. I set up trust funds, made anonymous donations, pulled strings behind the scenes. When you got into Westbrook, I made sure you had everything you needed to succeed. I was trying to protect you in the only way I knew how. And when Thornton started targeting me, Maya's voice hardened, where were you then? I didn't know at first. Marcus looked pained. I had people monitoring your academic progress, making sure you were doing well. But I never imagined that he was still doing this. It had been over 20 years. I thought surely someone would have stopped him by now. When did you find out? 6 months ago. One of my investigators flagged an irregularity, your near suspension for plagiarism. I looked into it and found that the accusation had come from Thornton. That's when I started digging. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the lake. What I found made me sick. He had done this to dozens of women over the years. Some had reported him, most had stayed silent. The university had a system in place to protect him. Secret settlements, non-disclosure agreements, reassignments. It was systematic, organized, almost professional. So you built a case against him, Maya said. I built a case against all of them. Thornton, the administrators who covered for him, the board members who looked the other way. Marcus turned to face her. I was planning to release everything through the media after your graduation. I didn't want to disrupt your ceremony, didn't want to make a scene. But when I saw what he was doing to you on that stage, you couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't stand by and watch him hurt you. Not again. Not when I finally had the power to stop him. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of 23 years of pain, secrets, and missed opportunities. Maya stood up and walked to the window, standing beside the father she had never known. The lake stretched out before them, peaceful and still, a stark contrast to the turmoil in her heart. I don't know how to feel about any of this, she admitted. Part of me is angry, at you, at Mom, at everyone who failed to stop Thornton for all these years. Part of me is relieved that it's finally over, and part of me is just sad. Sad for all the years we lost. Sad for the life that could have been. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I haven't earned that, but I want you to know that I'm here now. I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me. Not as some absent benefactor, but as a real father. Whatever that means to you. Maya turned to look at her mother, who was still sitting on the sofa, her face pale and drawn. What about you, Mom? What do you want? Linda stood up slowly, walking over to join them at the window. I want you to be happy, she said simply. I want you to have the life that was taken from me. And if that means making room for your father, then that's what we'll do. For the first time since the ordeal began, Maya felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, that would take time. Not trust, that would need to be rebuilt. But something else. Hope. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus's promised evidence had indeed been comprehensive. and its release to the media triggered an earthquake in the academic world. Richard Thornton was arrested within 48 hours, charged with multiple counts of harassment, coercion, and abuse of authority. Several university administrators were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The Board of Trustees convened an emergency session that lasted 3 days. Maya watched it all unfold from the safety of the lakeside estate, her phone buzzing constantly with messages from friends, journalists, and strangers who had heard her story. She ignored most of them, focusing instead on the slow, painful work of rebuilding her understanding of her own life. Her mother stayed with her, though their conversations were often tense and tearful. There were decades of secrets to unpack, misunderstandings to clear up, and wounds to acknowledge. Some nights they talked until dawn, sharing memories and feelings that had been buried for years. Marcus, for his part, kept a respectful distance. He was available when Maya wanted to talk, absent when she needed space. He answered every question she asked, no matter how painful, and made no excuses for his choices. One evening, about a week after graduation, Maya found herself sitting on the dock, her feet dangling over the water. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, and for the first time in months, she felt at peace. Footsteps approached from behind, and she turned to see both of her parents walking toward her. Marcus carried a bottle of wine and 3 glasses. Linda held a small photo album, one Maya had never seen before. "Mind if we join you?" Marcus asked. Maya gestured to the empty space beside her. "There's room." They sat down together, the 3 of them forming a line along the edge of the dock. Marcus poured the wine while Linda opened the photo album. "I kept these hidden for years," Linda admitted, flipping through the pages. "I didn't want you to ask questions that I wasn't ready to answer, but you deserve to see them now." The photos showed a young couple, obviously in love. Marcus with longer hair and a carefree smile. Linda, radiant and hopeful, her whole life ahead of her. There were pictures of them at campus events, on road trips, at what looked like a small engagement party with a handful of friends. "We were so young," Marcus murmured, looking at the images. "We had no idea what was coming." "No one ever does," Linda replied, "but maybe that's for the best. If we knew all the pain that life had in store, we might never take any risks at all." Maya looked at a photo of her parents standing in front of Westbrook University's main building, their arms around each other, grinning at the camera. She could see herself in both of them, her mother's eyes, her father's smile. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "That's up to you," Marcus said. "I've already stepped back from the day-to-day operations of my company. I can live anywhere, do anything. If you want me in your life, I'll be here. If you need more time, I'll wait." "And I'm not going anywhere either," Linda added. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." Maya looked out at the water, thinking about everything that had happened. The graduation ceremony that had ended in chaos, the father who had emerged from the shadows, the mother who had carried 23 years of secrets, the villain who had finally faced justice. It wasn't the ending she had expected. It wasn't even an ending at all, more like the beginning of a new chapter. "I don't want to rush anything," she said finally. "I have a lot to process, a lot to figure out, but I think I'd like to get to know you, Dad. Really know you. Not as some mysterious benefactor, but as a person." The word "dad" felt strange on her tongue, unfamiliar, but also right. Marcus's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I'd like that too." "And Mom," Maya turned to Linda, "I'm not going to pretend that I'm not hurt by the lies. I am, but I also understand why you did it. You were trying to protect me in your own way. That has to count for something." Linda reached out and took her daughter's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." The 3 of them sat in silence as the sun finished its descent, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The water lapped gently against the dock, and somewhere in the distance, a loon called out across the lake. For the first time in a very long time, Maya felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The summer passed in a blur of healing and discovery. Maya moved into a guest house on Marcus's estate, close enough to see her parents regularly, but with enough space to maintain her independence. She started therapy, working through the trauma of her encounters with Thornton and the revelations about her family. The court case against Thornton progressed slowly but steadily. Maya gave her testimony in a closed hearing, describing the months of harassment and manipulation she had endured. Several other women came forward with similar stories, spanning decades. The evidence against the university administration was equally damning, revealing a systematic cover-up that had protected predators at the expense of their victims. Marcus's involvement in the case was heavily scrutinized by the media. Some praised him as a crusader for justice. Others accused him of using his wealth and influence to settle a personal vendetta. Maya herself was alternately portrayed as a victim, a hero, and a pawn in a larger game. "How do you handle it?" she asked Marcus one afternoon as they sat together in his home office. "All the attention, all the criticism, it never seems to bother you." Marcus looked up from his computer, considering the question. "I stopped caring about public opinion a long time ago," he admitted. "When you've been through what I've been through, you learn that the only thing that matters is what you know to be true. Let others say what they want. History will be the judge." "That's very philosophical of you." "I've had 23 years to become philosophical." Marcus smiled, but there was sadness behind it. When you spend that long regretting the choices you've made, you develop a certain perspective. Maya nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I don't think you made the wrong choice. Staying away, I mean. It's what Mom wanted, and she had her reasons. If you had tried to force your way into our lives back then, who knows what would have happened? You're more forgiving than I deserve." "Maybe. Or maybe I just understand that life is complicated." Maya stood up and walked to the window. "Besides, you're here now. That's what matters." The words surprised her even as she said them. When had she stopped being angry? When had she started seeing Marcus not as the father who had abandoned her, but as a flawed human being who had done the best he could under impossible circumstances? Maybe it was the therapy. Maybe it was the passage of time, or maybe it was simply the realization that holding on to anger would only hurt herself. Fall arrived, bringing cooler temperatures and a new school year. Maya had deferred her graduate school applications to take the year off, but she knew she couldn't avoid the future forever. She had decisions to make about where her life would go from here. One October afternoon, she drove back to Westbrook University for the first time since graduation. The campus looked different in autumn, the trees ablaze with color, the students bustling between buildings in sweaters and scarves. Maya parked her car and walked slowly through the grounds, taking it all in. She stopped in front of the business administration building where she had taken Thornton's class, where everything had begun. The building looked ordinary, unremarkable, just bricks and glass, with no hint of the darkness that had unfolded within its walls. "Miss Johnson?" Maya turned to see a young woman approaching her. She was small, with dark hair and nervous eyes. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said. "I'm Sarah Chen. I was 2 years behind you in the program." Maya recognized the name. Sarah had been one of the other women who had come forward during the investigation. "You're not bothering me," Maya said. "I remember seeing your name in the news. How are you doing?" Sarah shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes. "I'm okay, getting through it. Therapy helps." "Yeah, it does." They stood together in silence for a moment, two survivors of the same storm. "I wanted to thank you," Sarah said finally, "for speaking up, for being the one who finally brought him down." "I didn't bring him down," Maya replied. "We all did. Every woman who came forward, every person who refused to stay silent." "Maybe, but you were the catalyst. If your father hadn't walked into that graduation—" Maya laughed softly. "That wasn't exactly planned." "Sometimes the best things aren't." Sarah smiled tentatively. "Anyway, I just wanted you to know that you made a difference. To me and to a lot of other people." Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. That means a lot." Sarah nodded, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the flow of students. Maya watched her go, thinking about all the invisible wounds that each of those students might be carrying, all the battles being fought in silence. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to Marcus, "Coming home for dinner. We should talk about what's next." His response came immediately. "I'll have the chef prepare your favorite. See you soon." Maya smiled and put her phone away. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, she felt ready to face it. Thanksgiving arrived with a cold snap and the promise of snow. For the first time in her life, Maya celebrated the holiday with both of her parents in the same room. The guest list was small, just the three of them, plus Destiny and her family, and a few of Marcus's closest associates. But the house was filled with warmth, laughter, and the aromas of a feast that the chef had been preparing for days. As they gathered around the table, Maya looked at the faces of the people she loved. Her mother, still fragile but stronger every day. Her father, still a stranger in many ways, but becoming more familiar with each passing week. Her best friend, who had stood by her through everything. "Before we eat," Marcus said, standing at the head of the table, "I'd like to propose a toast." Everyone raised their glasses. "To second chances," Marcus said, his eyes meeting Maya's. "To the courage to face our mistakes and the grace to forgive them. And to family in all its complicated, imperfect glory." "To family," everyone echoed. As Maya raised her glass, she thought about how different her life had become in just 6 months. The trauma was still there, probably always would be. But so was the hope. So was the love. The dinner was everything Maya had never known she was missing. Her mother and Marcus shared stories from their college days, painting a picture of two young people in love before the world had broken them. Destiny kept everyone laughing with tales of her and Maya's misadventures in the dorms. Even Marcus's business associates, normally stiff and formal, loosened up after a few glasses of wine. After the meal, as the others moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, Maya slipped out onto the back porch. The lake was frozen now, a sheet of white beneath the stars. The cold was sharp, but she welcomed it, letting it clear her head. "Mind if I join you?" She turned to see her mother approaching, wrapped in a thick cardigan. "Of course not." They stood together in silence, watching the stars. "I'm proud of you," Linda said quietly, "for everything you've been through, everything you've overcome. You're stronger than I ever was." "You're stronger than you know, Mom. You survived Thornton. You raised me on your own. You carried a secret for 23 years to protect me." Maya turned to face her mother. "That takes strength." Linda's eyes glistened. "I just wish I had been braver. Wish I had spoken up when it might have made a difference." "It made a difference now. Your story, combined with all the others, is what brought him down. You helped save the next generation of women who might have crossed his path." Linda reached out and pulled Maya into a hug. They stood there for a long moment, mother and daughter healing together. "I love you," Linda whispered. "I love you too, Mom." When they finally pulled apart, Maya noticed Marcus standing in the doorway, watching them with an expression that was hard to read. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. "I just wanted to let you know that there's apple pie inside, and Destiny is threatening to eat it all if we don't hurry." Maya laughed. "We can't have that." The three of them walked back inside together, their footsteps leaving trails in the light dusting of snow that had begun to fall. Winter deepened, and with it came the trial. Richard Thornton faced a courtroom packed with survivors, journalists, and supporters. Maya was there every day, sitting in the front row with her parents beside her. The prosecution's case was airtight. 37 women had come forward with accusations spanning 25 years. University emails showed a systematic effort to silence victims and protect Thornton. Financial records revealed secret settlements totaling over $3 million. Thornton's defense tried everything: character assassination, procedural objections, even an attempt to claim that the exposure was a revenge plot orchestrated by Marcus. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the jury saw through the tactics. On the last day of the trial, Maya was called to give her impact statement. She stood at the podium, looking out at the crowded courtroom, and spoke from the heart. "Richard Thornton took something from me that I can never get back," she began. "He took my sense of safety, my trust in authority, my belief that hard work and talent would be enough to succeed. He made me feel small, worthless, and afraid." She paused, gathering herself. "But he also gave me something, though he never intended to. He gave me the opportunity to find my voice, to connect with other survivors, to understand that I was never alone and that there are far more good people in this world than there are predators like him." Maya looked directly at Thornton, who sat at the defense table with his lawyers. "You tried to break me. You tried to break my mother, and who knows how many others before us, but you failed. We are still here. We are still standing. And now you are the one who will face the consequences of your actions." She turned back to the judge. "I ask this court to impose the maximum sentence, not for revenge, but for justice, for protection, for the women who never got the chance to speak their truth, and for the women who will never have to fear Richard Thornton again." When Maya returned to her seat, her mother and father each took one of her hands. They sat together in solidarity, waiting for the verdict. It came 3 hours later, guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in cheers and tears. Maya felt her knees go weak, and she would have fallen if Marcus hadn't been there to catch her. Thornton sat motionless, his face grey, as the reality of his downfall finally sank in. The judge imposed a sentence of 20 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. Several university administrators received their own sentences, ranging from fines to jail time. The institution itself faced a massive overhaul, with new policies and oversight committees to prevent future abuses. Outside the courthouse, Maya gave a brief statement to the press. "Today, justice was served. But this victory belongs to all of us, every survivor who came forward, every ally who supported us, every person who refused to look the other way. I hope that this outcome sends a message that predators can no longer hide behind power and prestige, and that their victims will no longer suffer in silence." As she walked away from the microphones, flanked by her parents and her best friend, Maya felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was over. Finally, truly over. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and bringing new life to the world. Maya had made her decision about the future. She would return to school, but not for a business degree. Instead, she had been accepted into a law program with a focus on victims' rights advocacy. "I want to help other people find their voices," she explained to Marcus one afternoon as they walked along the lakeshore. "I want to make sure that what happened to me, to Mom, to all those women, never happens to anyone else." Marcus nodded, pride evident in his expression. "I think you'll be extraordinary at it." "You sound surprised." "Not surprised, just grateful. Grateful that something good came out of all this pain." They walked in companionable silence for a while, the water lapping gently at the shore. "I've been thinking," Marcus said eventually, "about setting up a foundation, a legal defense fund for survivors of harassment and abuse. I want to provide resources for people who don't have the means to fight back against powerful institutions." Maya stopped walking, turning to face him. "That's a wonderful idea. I was hoping you might help run it. Not now, you have school to focus on, but eventually, if you're interested." Maya thought about it for a long moment. A year ago, she would have said no. A year ago, she barely knew this man, barely trusted him, barely understood her own story. But a year ago felt like a lifetime away. "I'd like that," she said finally. "I'd like that very much." Marcus smiled, a real smile, unguarded and full of hope. "Then we have a plan." They continued their walk, the spring sun warm on their faces. Behind them, the lake house stood as a testament to everything they had been through, a place of healing, of new beginnings, of family rebuilt from the ashes of the past. And ahead of them, stretching out toward the horizon, was a future full of possibilities. The graduation ceremony at Westbrook University the following June was unlike any that had come before. The scandal of the previous year had led to sweeping changes. A new administration, new policies, and a new commitment to protecting students. Maya was invited to give the keynote address. She stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of blue caps and gowns, and saw herself in every face, young people on the cusp of their lives, full of hope and uncertainty, ready to take on the world. 1 year ago, I stood on this stage as a graduate, she began, but my celebration was interrupted by an act of violence and abuse that had been hidden for too long. Today, I stand here again, not as a victim, but as a survivor, and I want to share with you what I've learned. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over the crowd. I've learned that life rarely goes according to plan, that the people we trust can betray us, and the institutions we believe in can fail us. I've learned that injustice exists, and that confronting it is painful and terrifying, and sometimes feels impossible. Maya's voice grew stronger. But I've also learned that we are not alone, that there are people who will stand by us, fight for us, and believe us when no one else will. I've learned that justice, though slow, is possible, and I've learned that our greatest struggles can become our greatest strengths. She looked out at the graduates, meeting as many eyes as she could. As you leave this place and enter the world, you will face challenges that no diploma can prepare you for. You will encounter unfairness, cruelty, and obstacles that seem insurmountable. But I want you to remember this: you have the power to make a difference. Every time you speak up for someone who can't speak for themselves, every time you refuse to look the other way, every time you choose courage over comfort, you change the world. Maya took a deep breath, feeling the emotion rising in her chest. This university failed me, and it failed many others, but it also gave me the education and the connections that allowed me to fight back. Use what you've learned here. Use it to build a better world, and never ever be afraid to tell your truth. As she concluded her speech, the stadium erupted in applause. Maya looked out at the standing ovation, at the parents and families cheering, at the administrators who had promised to do better, at the empty chair where Richard Thornton would never sit again. In the front row, she saw her mother and father side by side, their faces shining with tears and pride. Destiny was there too, whooping and whistling with characteristic enthusiasm. Maya smiled, feeling the tears streaming down her own face. This was what triumph felt like. Not just surviving, but thriving. Not just enduring, but transforming, taking the worst thing that had ever happened to her and turning it into fuel for change. As she left the stage, her parents met her at the bottom of the stairs. Marcus pulled her into a tight hug, his voice rough with emotion. "I am so proud of you," he whispered, "more proud than I can ever say." "Thank you," Maya whispered back, "for being here, for everything." Linda wrapped her arms around both of them, and for a moment the three of them stood there, united by blood and history and the long, winding road that had brought them to this point. When they finally separated, Destiny was waiting with champagne. "To Maya," she declared, popping the cork, "the baddest woman I know." They laughed and drank, celebrating not just the speech, but everything it represented. The battles won, the wounds healing, the future stretching out before them full of promise. As the party continued around her, Maya slipped away for a quiet moment. She found a secluded spot near the edge of the stadium, looking out at the campus that had been the setting for both her greatest trauma and her greatest triumph. She thought about everything that had brought her here, the lies that had protected and imprisoned her, the villain who had seemed invincible until he wasn't, the father who had emerged from the shadows at the moment she needed him most, the mother who had carried an impossible burden for decades, and herself, the frightened girl who had almost given up, the survivor who had found her voice, the advocate who would spend her life fighting for others. Maya Johnson, daughter of Marcus Kingston and Linda Johnson, graduate of Westbrook University, future lawyer, founder eventually of a foundation that would help countless others find justice. But for now, just Maya, standing in the sunlight, feeling the warmth on her face, letting the tears flow freely. "Are you okay?" She turned to see her father approaching, his expression concerned. "I'm more than okay," she replied, smiling through her tears. "I'm finally free." Marcus nodded, understanding in his eyes. He stood beside her, looking out at the same view, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. "I know I missed a lot of years," he said finally. "I know I can never get them back, but I want you to know that every single day of my life, from now until my last breath, I will be here for you. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, I will never disappear again." Maya reached out and took his hand. "I know," she said simply. "I believe you." They stood together in silence, father and daughter, watching the world go by. And for the first time in her life, Maya felt completely, perfectly whole. The years that followed brought many changes. Maya graduated from law school at the top of her class, then joined a firm that specialized in advocating for survivors of abuse and harassment. She won case after case, building a reputation as a fierce and compassionate advocate. The Kingston Foundation grew from an idea into a reality. With Marcus's resources and Maya's expertise, they provided free legal services to thousands of survivors who would otherwise have had no recourse. They lobbied for legislative changes, funded research into the causes and prevention of workplace harassment, and trained organizations on how to create safer environments. Linda, too, found a new purpose. She became a speaker and advocate, sharing her story at conferences and schools and corporate trainings. The shame she had carried for so long transformed into a weapon against silence and complicity. The relationship between Maya and Marcus deepened with time. They learned each other's habits, quirks, and histories. They disagreed, argued, and reconciled. They built the kind of bond that can only come from choosing to show up, day after day, even when it's hard. "You know," Marcus said one evening as they sat on the dock of the lake house watching the sunset, "I never thought I would have this, a real relationship with my daughter, a chance to be part of your life." "Neither did I," Maya admitted, "but I'm glad we have it." "So am I." They clinked their glasses together, the sound carrying across the still water. "What do you think comes next?" Marcus asked. Maya thought about the question. In the years since graduation, she had learned not to make too many plans. Life had a way of upending expectations, for better and for worse. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I know I'll face it with my family beside me. That's enough." Marcus smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling with warmth. "That's more than enough." The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Maya leaned back in her chair, feeling the peace settle over her like a blanket. She had started her adult life with a lie, the belief that her father was dead, that she was alone in the world, that the powerful would always win against the powerless. But she had rewritten that story. With courage, with help, with love, she had created a new truth. A truth where fathers returned from the shadows. A truth where villains faced justice. A truth where survivors became advocates, and advocates became change-makers. A truth where every ending was also a beginning. Maya Johnson closed her eyes and breathed in the evening air, smelling pine and water and possibility. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight she was exactly where she belonged. Home. Years passed, like chapters in a book, each one bringing new experiences and challenges. Maya's legal career flourished beyond what she could have imagined when she first stepped into law school. Her firm became known as a beacon of hope for those who had been wronged, a place where the overlooked and the silenced could find a voice. She argued cases before the Supreme Court, testified before Congress, and was profiled in major publications. But the accolades never changed her fundamental mission, to ensure that what happened to her and her mother would become increasingly rare, and eventually a relic of a darker past. On a crisp autumn morning, 5 years after the trial that had changed everything, Maya stood outside the new Kingston Center for Survivor Advocacy. The building was a converted warehouse in downtown Atlanta, now transformed into a state-of-the-art facility with legal offices, counseling rooms, and a community center. "Ready?" Marcus asked, standing beside her. Maya looked at the building, at the crowd gathered for the ribbon cutting, at the logo that bore her family name. "More than ready." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. The mayor spoke about the center's importance to the community. Several survivors shared their stories, their voices strong despite the pain behind them. And when it was Maya's turn to speak, she kept it simple. This center exists because too many people have suffered in silence for too long. It exists because justice should not be reserved for those who can afford it. And it exists because every person deserves to be believed, to be supported, and to be helped toward healing. She cut the ribbon, and the crowd cheered. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and Maya felt a swell of pride that had nothing to do with her own accomplishments and everything to do with what this building represented. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and the media packed up their equipment, Maya walked through the center with her mother. Linda moved slowly these days, her health declining after years of carrying burdens both physical and emotional. But her eyes were bright as she looked around at the counseling rooms and the library and the welcoming reception area. "You did this," Linda said softly. "You took our pain and turned it into something beautiful." "We did this," Maya corrected. "All of us. You, me, Dad, everyone who refused to stay silent." Linda stopped in front of a wall of photographs. They showed the survivors who had been part of the movement, the advocates who had fought alongside them, the legislators who had championed new protections. In the center was a photo of Maya at her graduation ceremony, the moment before everything had changed. "I remember that day so clearly," Linda said. "I was so scared. Scared that he would hurt you, scared that the truth would come out, scared that you would hate me for the lies. I could never hate you, Mom. I know that now, but back then I wasn't sure of anything." Linda reached out and touched the photo gently. "You were so brave. You still are." Maya put her arm around her mother's shoulders. "I learned from the best." They stood together in silence, two women whose lives had been shaped by trauma but not defined by it. Outside, the autumn leaves swirled in the wind, and the city went on with its business, unaware of the small moment of connection happening within these walls. That evening, the family gathered at the lake house for a celebration dinner. Destiny was there with her husband and their twin daughters, who had become honorary nieces to Maya. Marcus presided over the table with the quiet contentment of a man who had finally found peace. As they ate and laughed and shared stories, Maya looked around at the faces of the people she loved, her mother, frail but radiant, her father finally at ease in his role, her best friend living her own beautiful life. The next generation, already growing up in a world that was slightly safer because of their struggles. "I want to make a toast," Maya announced, raising her glass, "to Thornton." The table fell silent, confused. Maya smiled. "You heard me. To Richard Thornton, the man who tried to destroy us and in doing so united us, the man whose cruelty gave us purpose and whose downfall gave us hope." She looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "We would not be here, would not have this family, would not have this mission if not for the darkness we overcame together. So thank you, Richard Thornton, wherever you are, for teaching us what we're made of." The silence stretched for a moment, and then Marcus started to laugh. Soon everyone was laughing, the tension broken, the absurdity of the toast somehow perfect. "To Thornton," they echoed, clinking their glasses together. It was not forgiveness, it was not absolution. It was simply the acknowledgement that even the worst experiences can be transformed into something meaningful, and that the best revenge is a life well lived. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the house had fallen quiet, Maya found herself on the dock once again. The lake was still, reflecting the stars like a mirror. The air was cool, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and distant wood smoke. She thought about everything that had happened. The scared girl who had walked across a graduation stage, unaware that her life was about to change. The confrontation that had exposed decades of abuse. The revelation that had given her a father. The trial that had delivered justice. The advocacy that had become her life's work. And she thought about what came next. She was 30 years old now, no longer the young woman who had been victimized by a powerful man. She was a lawyer, an advocate, a daughter, a friend. She had built something meaningful from her pain, and she would continue to build for as long as she lived. But there was more to life than work, more to life than fighting. She was finally ready to admit that. "Penny, for your thoughts." Maya turned to see her father approaching, 2 cups of hot chocolate in his hands. "Just thinking about the future," she said, accepting the offered cup. "And what does the future hold?" Maya smiled. "I'm not entirely sure, but I think it might involve slowing down a little, taking time for myself, maybe even falling in love." Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Is there someone specific you have in mind?" "Maybe." Maya laughed at his expression. "Don't worry, you'll be the first to know. Well, second. Destiny will always be first." "As it should be." Marcus settled into the chair beside her. "For what it's worth, I think slowing down is a wonderful idea. You've been running at full speed for 5 years. It's okay to take a breath," says the man who built a billion-dollar company, and who is now retired from said company, spending his days fishing and reading and annoying his daughter. Marcus grinned. "I've earned the right to dispense wisdom." They sat together in comfortable silence, father and daughter, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. "Thank you," Maya said eventually, "for everything, for coming back into my life, for fighting for me, for being here now. I don't say it enough, but I'm grateful. Every day, I'm grateful." Marcus reached over and squeezed her hand. "And I'm grateful for you, for your forgiveness, for your strength, for the chance to be your father. It's the greatest gift I've ever received." Maya leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" "We have, and we still have a long way to go." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "But we'll go together." The stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the human drama unfolding beneath them. The lake lapped gently at the shore. The night embraced the world in its quiet darkness. And on the dock, 2 people who had found each other against all odds sat together, at peace with the past and ready for whatever the future might bring. The story of Maya Johnson did not end that night on the dock. It continued, as all stories do, in ways both expected and surprising. She fell in love, eventually, with a fellow advocate she met at a conference. They married in a small ceremony at the lake house, surrounded by family and friends. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl, who grew up knowing their grandmother's story and understanding the importance of speaking truth to power. Linda lived long enough to see her grandchildren, to hold them in her arms and tell them stories of her own childhood. She passed peacefully in her sleep one spring morning, at the age of 72, with her daughter beside her. Maya mourned her deeply, but she also celebrated the life her mother had lived and the legacy she had left behind. Marcus remained a constant presence, the patriarch of a family he had once believed lost to him forever. He taught his grandchildren to fish, to appreciate the outdoors, and to always stand up for what was right. He supported Maya's work, attended her speeches, and never stopped telling everyone who would listen how proud he was of his daughter. The Kingston Center for Survivor Advocacy expanded over the years, opening branches in cities across the country. It became a model for organizations worldwide, a testament to what could be achieved when survivors were believed and supported. And Richard Thornton, he died in prison, forgotten by all except those who had reason to remember. His legacy was not the illustrious career he had built through manipulation and abuse, but the reckoning that had brought him down. He became a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when powerful institutions protect predators at the expense of their victims. On the 10th anniversary of the graduation ceremony that had changed everything, Maya returned to Westbrook University one final time. The campus had changed again, with new buildings and new students and new dreams being born. But the essence remained the same, a place of learning, of growth, of possibility. She walked through the grounds alone, retracing the steps she had taken a decade earlier. The business administration building was still there, though it had been renamed. A plaque near the entrance commemorated the survivors who had come forward to expose the abuse that had festered within its walls. Maya stopped in front of the plaque and read the names. Her mother's name was there, near the top. Her own name was at the bottom, the last to be added. "We did it, Mum," she whispered. "We really did it." A breeze stirred the leaves of the nearby trees, and Maya smiled. She liked to think her mother was listening, somewhere beyond the veil that separated the living from the dead. She turned and walked away, leaving the past behind her. The future was waiting, full of challenges and opportunities and moments of joy. She was ready for all of it. Maya Johnson had started her adult life with a lie, and she had rebuilt it with the truth. She had faced darkness and emerged into light. She had lost everything and found something even more precious. She had found herself. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. The sun was setting over Atlanta, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Maya drove through the city streets, her mind wandering to all the changes she had witnessed over the years. The skyline was different now, with new towers rising toward the clouds, but some things remained the same. The heat, the traffic, the relentless energy of a city always in motion. She pulled into the driveway of her modest home, a far cry from her father's lakeside estate, but perfect for her small family. Her husband's car was already there, and through the window she could see him helping their daughter with homework at the kitchen table. Maya sat in the car for a moment watching them. Her daughter, 11 years old, had inherited her grandmother's eyes and her grandfather's stubborn streak. Her son, 9, was probably upstairs with his nose in a book, oblivious to the world around him. They were her joy, her purpose, her reason for everything. She got out of the car and walked toward the house, the familiar creak of the front steps greeting her like an old friend. The door opened before she could reach it, and her daughter came running out. "Mom," Grandpa called. "He wants to know if we're still coming to the lake house this weekend. Tell him we wouldn't miss it for the world." "Okay." The girl ran back inside, already shouting the message into the phone. Maya paused on the threshold, looking at the life she had built, the house that was full of laughter and love, the children who would never know the fear she had known, the husband who had chosen to walk beside her through all of it. This was what triumph looked like. Not the awards on her office wall, not the cases she had won, not even the center that bore her family's name. It was this. Ordinary moments with the people she loved, strung together like pearls on a necklace. "Coming in?" her husband asked, appearing in the doorway with a smile. "In a minute," Maya replied. "I just want to appreciate this for a second." He understood, as he always did. He kissed her forehead and went back inside, leaving her to her thoughts. Maya looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. She thought about her mother, about her father, about all the people who had shaped her into who she was. She thought about the battles she had fought and the ones still to come. She thought about the future, stretching out before her like an open road. And she smiled, because she knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, she would face it with courage, with compassion, and with love. That was her story, and it was far from over.